How's it going, everybody? I just wanted to let you know that I was on a podcast recently called Yes, But Why, hosted by Amy Jordan. They're based out of Austin, Texas. And it's a lot like that Discount Film School podcast that we do at Red Cow. They talk with creative people about creative things. We talked for about an hour and 10 minutes about BoxMac and Red Cow and all things filmmaking. I'm going to show you the first 10 minutes of it. And then if you want to go over to yesbutwhypodcast.com, we're episode 261, or you can just search for Frankie Frayne and listen to the whole thing. I actually really enjoyed the conversation. We went deep on a lot of different creative topics, and especially if you're somebody who's been stuck at home for a year and is kind of trying to get back into the creative mood, I think this is a good podcast to go to. So check it out. First 10 minutes, and then go over there, yesbutwhypodcast.com, listen to the whole thing. Thanks.
Hello, Yes But Why listeners. This is your host, Amy Jordan. This week on Yes But Why, I chat with Frankie Frayne, award-winning filmmaker, YouTube content creator, and head of Red Cow Entertainment. Frankie talks to me all about his love for making movies. We also discuss technology, Lord of the Rings, and mac and cheese. I now present to you Yes But Why episode 261. Filmmaker Frankie Frayne on telling stories and getting the job done. Enjoy.
Like probably, the earliest I can remember of when I felt some kind of creative drive or felt inspired to go create was probably like 6 or 7. I remember I had a Tandy computer my sister got it in 89. And, you could word process. And I remember I was reading like novelizations of sitcoms and like Power Rangers and Ninja Turtles and stuff. And I made my own spiral bound Power Rangers novelization where, you essentially you watch the show and then you transcribe the dialogue with the actions. And, so I was in like second grade and I remember being like really committed to the idea of completing it. I have a vivid memory of it being like a hot summer day and there was other things to do besides finish a book no one was going to read. But I got really into, I think I was really attracted to the idea of a professionally made product of some kind, something not that wasn't only artwork, but something almost viable that could be consumed by somebody else. Because I think when you're growing up, the first time you hear the word art or artwork, you're generally talking about macaroni pictures or drawings with crayons and that sort of thing. And this was like, oh, but with the computer, with the technology, I can produce something, more developed. And so I remember that. And then I became aware, I think I had read a play or probably not a screenplay, but something that was a format that showed like character dialogue and action between character dialogue. And so I wrote a few little things like that just to play with the idea. And then, animation was interesting, right? Again, there was the technology component. I ended up, my career now is in technology. I'm an IT director for a college, but the technology aspect to it never went away. But if you skip forward in time, it was around the time I saw South Park where I came to learn that these guys animated this show with construction paper. That captured my imagination, where it was, I was aware of what stop motion animation was, but it was like, yeah, but what if it was even cruder? What if the barrier of entry was even lower, where you could actually, just cut out some characters, and as long as it's funny, as long as it's interesting, as long as it's derived from real life in some way. So I started writing little scripts and doing animations in that construction paper style. And I remember now we're in like, I'm like 11 or 12. And every time somebody says something funny, every time there's a serendipitous situation, I'm mentally cataloging it for like, oh, maybe I could factor that into a narrative somewhere. Like now nothing is going to waste all of a sudden. Like I start getting into that mode. And then, exactly.
You're like a tiny child with like a joke notebook where you're all yeah, that is funny.
Yeah. It was looking for scenarios, or opportunities. I was learning about parody. And this is, around the time of early internet where there was no YouTube, right? It wasn't like there was like this rich, vibrant, world of people uploading, but there was like E-Bombs world, and there was some of this sort of subversive internet stuff. So, and then because of the South Park link, I became aware of the fact that Trey Parker and Matt Stone, the creators of South Park, they had made a film in college. It was like their college thesis film. And so it was at a Blockbuster, strangely enough, even though it was like this very independently distributed, Troma Studios put it out. And so I rented it. I was at a sleepover in 8th grade and I said, hey guys, we all went out and we're supposed to like rent a movie. And I was like, let's rent this one called Cannibal the Musical. And like the mom was like, all right. And we took it home.
Like, all right. Oh my God.
Yeah. I think she only saw the musical and not Cannibal. So we went home and we stayed up really late and we watched it on this old tube TV. Outside of the birth of my child, the meeting of my wife, this is probably one of the most character defining moments of my life. We put on this VHS and it was this gory scene that started the movie, but it was comedic. It was like it was sort of like Monty Python comic violence. And the TV we watched it on was tuned incorrectly. So the fake blood looked even faker. It was like bright orange, basically. And so it was like, and I remember all my friends were like cracking up at how stupid what they were seeing was, but also how, it was a clever movie. It was a musical. It was a Rodgers and Hammerstein production on top of being, like a Troma B movie. And so they all fell asleep mid-film and it was almost cliche, like I'm just like glued to the TV, not because I necessarily love the movie, though I did, but more because it was the first time I can remember where I saw, it was very clear to me that the people that made this film had fun making it. Like I was seeing the production of the film in much more clarity than the film itself. And I thought, well, again, much like their animation, I was like, well, this is a low barrier of entry. This is something I've always talked about, which is, I think and you've had lots of conversations with creative people, often they pinpoint their moment of inspiration for when they found something that seemed doable. Like, like musicians who found the Ramones or something are like, well, I can play a few chords, it's rare that a filmmaker sees Stanley Kubrick movies and it's like, that's it. I could be a filmmaker too, The barrier of entries is way too high. So, that was the biggie. And then that I never could draw or anything. That's part of why the crude animation was attractive. But all of a sudden, this new thing was presented to me, which was like, you just need to take your funniest friends, your most you need to find some creative people at age 12 and get a camera. And, and at this point, DV cameras were available for $200. I remember I did have a dishwashing job for a whole summer and I bought this little JVC camcorder, started making movies. And notably it popped into because of this Cannibal movie. I was like, oh, I should make a feature length film. There's no such thing as a short film. I don't know what that is. I should make an hour, I won't be a real human being until I've made an hour and a half long film. So that was my goal. And I wrote this, this movie called I Need to Lose 10 Pounds, which was it was a musical about a kid who wanted to lose weight. And it had all the kind of B movie signatures that I had, and now at that time I started to become really interested in kind of, like John Waters and, sort of like grotesque, movies of the 70s and 80s and stuff. And so I was kind of going in that direction. And for the next 6 years, from age 14 to 20, I worked on this I Need to Lose 10 Pounds feature film. And it was reviewed once by somebody as it's like the Lord of the Rings of high school board, film kids. Like, this movie was, I got a lot of very reluctant people to come along for the ride with me. And it did take 6 years. And you see very visibly people going from basically prepubescent to college aged. I had this weird, I don't know. It was like, if I didn't finish this film, I was going to die. This kind of irrational commitment to seeing the project out. And there were lots of times where, key people that we had shot lots with were on the brink of dropping out. And I met my girlfriend who would become my wife at age 14. She ended up being a 15-year-old producer on the film, and she continues to produce my stuff to this day. And she has so much to do with she's so enabling. Like, I was like, I need, I need like some fake dynamite or something. She'd stay up all night making the fake dynamite. Or I need a dummy that we can hit with your dad's Suburban tomorrow. And she would stay up all night building the dummy with me. And it was so, like I said, character defining. I think I knew if you don't finish this movie, you're probably not going to make the next movie either. Like it was like a rite of passage. It was, you've got to, for your own sense of self, you have to finish this thing.
That's the case for all of us. It makes sense. Also, it makes sense that like, it's hard to make a feature length film, and you were making it up as you were going along. And like, it takes adults with millions of dollars multiple years to make movies.
Right.
So I feel like, 6 years, very regular when you factor in all of the school you had to go to and other events you had that were taking up your time.
I remember thinking that, because I went to film school, I remember thinking, oh my God, I have to finish this movie before I go to film school, because there's not going to be one undergrad film student there who hasn't completed a feature film. I completely invented that in my head. Yeah. And I remember freaking out about it, that like senior year was coming up and I hadn't finished the damn movie yet. But yeah, I mean, we shot and shot and shot and shot. I mean, it's worth saying that like, it was not only ambitious to do the 90-minute thing, but it wasn't as though we wrote a screenplay that like it takes place in one room or there's only 3 people, or it was like, it's like an adventure epic. It was like, there's all kinds of things that happen in this movie, and the locations I secured, I got a school bus for a day and we were left unsupervised with it. We shot in a beautiful chapel with swords and there were no adults around. And I look back at some of the behind the scenes stuff and I'm like, if 35-year-old me walked in on these 16-year-old kids doing what I would be like, you're all going home. This is insane. But we just, I don't know, once we had cars. And this will become relevant later, but I had a friend, this guy named John Hunt, and he's now my co-host on the most popular thing I do, this mac and cheese review show called BoxMac. And so he's kind of in some ways the flagship personality of our YouTube channel now, but he, at the time he was just a very technical guy that was also a musician. And so he was really the fuel that made me go from, oh, I think I'd really like to make a feature film to, hey, actually, maybe we could make a feature film.